proudly presents The Broadcasters Podcast. A weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the king of podcasts.
I've only been talking about this subject for 14 months, and I'm not even the biggest expert about what's going on in Hollywood, but I have followed what was eventually going to be coming very soon to Hollywood. But this summer we might have a shutdown of production of anything because the digital disruption in Hollywood and the digital disruption across all media continues, and in television and movies it's also very rampant, and a lot of competing pieces are going on right now. And there are people that are behind the scenes, content creators like you and me. You keep an eye on what's going on about the piece of the pie that all these people want to do. And also a change of the establishment of the way the protocol that Hollywood has been for a long time. A lot of things have changed. When you look at the Me Too movement a couple of years ago, when you're seeing right now, the changes that the Writers Guild, the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, Directors Guild, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, all of those organizations, they're all culminating into a shutdown. Because when one starts, then the other, and it's a domino effect that will continue, and has happened several times before. We have talked about it extensively here on the Broadcasters Podcast, and I'm back here once again, KOP, with you to explain all this to you. So keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and start about it tonight, because it looks like we're getting a stockpile for a Hollywood strike. The picket signs might come up in the next few months, and people should be aware of it. And I'm really surprised how much is not being said about it. It's an industry thing, but I think people that are outside of the industry should realize what's going on here. There are a lot of people that are creating movies and TV shows and writing scripts and screenplays and trying to adapt books and essays and short stories and what have you, trying to get them onto the screen, the big screen, the small screen, the silver screen, what have you. I think it's very important to bring this up. So if nobody else is going to talk about it, the Bob Garfields of the world and the NPRs on the media or any other supposed media channel or podcast out there is not going to talk about it. I will, because this is something I am interested in. And I'm sure there are other people out there that feel the same way. So that's why I come on this show and talk about it. Now, I have that coming up for all of us tonight here on the program. Also have a feature interview. I'm going to start a new one tonight. And this week's guest for a two-parter is Joshua Otten. He's the CEO of Ronin Content Services and the co-founder of content and original productions at PRØHBTD. Take the vowels out. PROHB, well, actually O with a slash. PRØHBTD. But if you can find out more information about him, you can go to ronincontent.com. RONIN content.com, like the movie that came out with Robert De Niro, John Reno, and I forget who else was in that. With a great car chase scene. Well, I'll remember that. He spent the last 20 years as a trailblazing developer of premium entertainment, builder of digital media platforms, and a creator of content marketing solutions. He has helped to raise for content $60 million in capital investments. One of the new things he came on to talk about was his content and service and distribution agency, which he is really providing content for a number of streaming channels, including a new over-the-top network for cannabis called Social Club TV. And a very interesting thing that he's doing right now with that, working with a lot of different companies, Post Media, Daily Motion, and Pluto TV, and putting out content which would go to Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Prime, and others. So we talk all about content distribution and the issues around the strike, the streaming media. We go through everything about that going on here on the program. So we'll start off with that a little bit later on. Part one of the interview with Joshua Otten. So let me move along and talk about the latest from the Hollywood labor unions. And again, I'm surprised nobody wants to talk about this. Why is this not point of center for some people? You know, the Grammys, the award shows, are they really rumbling about this at all? Or are they just really just delusional and not thinking about the fact that, you know what? their regular meal ticket might be stopped for a while. Will they have to go ahead and carry picket signs themselves as a sign of solidarity? But nobody's talking about that. But we're at that point once again. And it hasn't been like this in, 13 years, I think was the last time? We talked all about it. I'm not going to get back into that again, but let's talk about the latest part. Bryn Elise Sandberg from The Hollywood Reporter reports, as the Writers Guild signals it is, quote, ready for a battle, end quote, over streaming revenue, producers are giving early series renewals and extending episode counts in case Hollywood shuts down this summer. So, at the moment, the Writers Guild of America and their 15,000 members, are they going to walk out like they did a decade ago if they can't reach an agreement with the studios? Well, here's what's going on. We are now coming up on May 1st at the ending of a 3-year contract with the Writers Guild of America and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, AMPTP. So now, this is what's going on. The demands by the Writers Guild on this part, which, remember, they're already in dispute and no longer under contract to the Screen Actors Guild. To the Association of Talent Agents. They're already not doing anything because the ATA does not want to adhere to an agency code of conduct, A, and B, they do not want to change the common practice of packaging writers, directors, screenwriters, and the whole staff into one movie project, into a bundle. They don't want that anymore. Everybody wants to get a better piece of the puzzle and much more residuals, including for streaming media. So they're all worrying about that. Now, the demands that the AMPTP is being asked of by the Writers Guild. Here's what's going on: is to center on compensation in the streaming media when backends are being limited or eliminated, residuals are down, and shows are producing fewer episodes. Now, this has not stopped executives of the major studios, networks, and streaming outlets from building contingencies whenever they can. We talked about that before, that this was all starting to happen. In recent months, we're hearing about ramping up unscripted content, turning to non-U.S. material as backup, and stockpiling scripts as an effort to lessen the impact of a strike, which it cost an estimated $2.5 billion in the Los Angeles economy in 2007-2008. So the strike, which Guild leadership is quick to point out, it's a union, the Writers Guild. We therefore have to be ready for a battle if the circumstance demands it. That's according to the president of WGA, David A. Goodman. He says, but predicting, quote, the outcome of negotiation right now is like asking in the first quarter of a football game will go into sudden death overtime. It's nonsense. Nobody knows. AMPTP has declined to comment about this. So some of the things we're seeing as a result, there are active conversations about doing so on CBS's Magnum PI, Fox's 911, and multiple CW shows, where there would not be a typical months-long hiatus between seasons in favor of rolling almost immediately into the next season. Then you have another issue where strike preparation or hitting the ground running quickly after, renewals are being doled out earlier than usual, and outlets like the CW, which typically produce pilots, are handing out straight to series orders for the first time. So to speed up and quickly green light, rapid fire the process of new shows so that they're in the production schedule and there is no waiting for the green light. Shows are getting greenlit automatic without the normal protocol. That is huge. Next, CBS quietly upped its episode count on MacGyver, which is starting up in the mid-season now, from 13 episodes to 22, so it will have fresh content available during a possible shutdown. At Showtime, the City on a Hill series saw its season cut from 10 episodes to 8 to avoid an incomplete season in the event of a strike. Netflix, a few writers' rooms have been accelerated in an attempt to bank more scripts by late April. Now, there's also non-U.S. development we talked about, and that's a growing trend that outlets like Netflix and HBO. One broadcast network is in talks to acquire a Canadian show with the express purpose of having strike-proof fare which was a tactic that was employed during the 2007-2008 strike as programmers grew desperate for original content. Now, this is interesting because you're going to get some international content that will get a chance to be seen. Canadian content might get a chance to be brought down. BBC content might get pushed over. We've seen this before in very limited points, but to see these networks actually buying out to go ahead and get content from overseas, that might not be bad for their audience because, you know, if you're giving a different view to certain shows that are really done well, say if any BBC shows or Sky TV shows, they get brought overseas and they perform very well. And the way they're putting them together, where it's not that regular hodgepodge where every CBS show looks the same and every ABC show looks very low budget and NBC looks like it's just, I don't know, it's just not there. A different feel, a different look to network TV would really make a big difference. But then again, nobody's flocking to network TV. The commercials are keeping people away. And just to feel the nuance of going to network TV and cable TV, maybe people are not going into so much, but I think cable could really take advantage of it. I could see that happening. Now, also staying in the game is animation and reality, which are two genres that have already experienced an uptick in the lead up on the broadcast networks. Buyers are now, quote, stocking up a little more than they would normally. That's according to ITV America President Adam Shear. He has a bunch of alternative series across different platforms. And sources in the unscripted space suggest that many passes now come with a caveat. If there's a strike and the project hasn't sold elsewhere, sellers will reconsider. Or as one put it, quote, they're calling dibs, end quote. Now, what's also going to be is how far-reaching a stoppage could be. Some people are wondering how long would the strike last. And according to Warner Media Entertainment Chairman Robert Greenblatt, and he says, quote, crossing the picket line becomes really tricky for people. So even if you get ahead and stockpile, the odds of actually making these things diminish because the sister and brother guilds might not agree to work, end quote. And another one studio executive under the cloud of anonymity wants to say, quote, we learned a hard way last time. And so the town's top showrunners, this strike will help put them in a murky position of technically being allowed on set as a producer, but not being able to offer any writing services. So, for instance, Shameless co-creator John Wells, he says, quote, a lot of us have contractual productorial and directorial responsibilities. So you have to go, but we don't rewrite anything. It gets a little awkward. There'll be plenty more who will flat out refuse. Some executives and reps could put them at risk of having their deal suspended. If a strike were to carry on, the lucrative overalls of the past few years could fall prey to force majeure. So this is where we are. Let me move on to some more details. The Directors Guild and Screen Actors Guild contracts are also then up June 30th. So remember, you already have the ATA and the WGA already on strike. You have the AMPTP May 1st. June 30th then is the Directors Guild and the Screen Actors Guild simultaneously. This is all we're talking about. At the moment, Directors Guild would normally try to go ahead and try to get a deal done or started early in advance. At the moment, that guild will reveal that it's going to begin formal talks with the AMPTP February 10th. When those formal talks commence, the DGA's negotiations tend to be brief, set the pattern of bargaining for the other guilds. So everybody's all watching and waiting. And then if that weren't enough, the rumblings about the possibility of Netflix, the only major player that's not part of the AMPTP, negotiating its own separate deal with the WGA, is further ratcheting up studio executive anxieties, meaning that writers would, at least for a period of time, be able to only work for Netflix. There's precedent, after all, because the streamer stuck its own pack with the Screen Actors Guild last summer, and they are in the process of doing so with the below-the-line labor union, the IATSE. So, again, Netflix found themselves a failsafe, and I'll tell you what. What does this do to the streaming media outlets that are just coming into play? Peacock, CBS All Access, HBO Max, Apple TV. I mean, think about it. Disney Plus. Could some of these outlets suffer as a result because they're not going to have that new content to push new subscribers? I mean, we already heard a couple of things being put out during the Super Bowl where there are two new series that are being brought in for Disney Plus, and the return of The Mandalorian for season 2, which is scheduled for October. So the fact of the matter is, again, everything has to be written. You can still produce content, but nothing else can be written. Again, the unions put a big kibosh on everything, and this will slow everything down. And then to pick everything back up will take a while. So content in 2020, movies and TV, will be affected. And so there's a lot of room for a lot of different places. The independents that will not be part of a union, SCAPs, or international work could get a good push this year. So this might be something interesting for everybody, just to see what kind of content could come up and rise above from the normal fare that the studios and the networks will offer us. Think about it. If we're getting new content, right, that comes into play that is not a reboot or a remake, and something new and unique to open the door of things like this, is actually a pretty good thing. That I actually like, and that might actually serve well for everybody. So I want to see where that goes up. We just mentioned before the DGA and the AMPTP starting the new contract negotiations. So again, February 10th, they'll begin negotiations for a new film and TV contract. We just talked more about the conversation being part of the talks. And here's what's being said in the story as well, from another story from Deadline.com. They mentioned about how, while and this is trying to see who this is that made this comment. Todd Holland, Todd Holland, who was part of the Directors Guild Negotiations Committee. He makes mentions that while we have begun negotiations earlier in some past cycles, what dictates timing is our process, not a particular target date. We are in the midst of a complicated, rapidly changing and evolving industry, with studios continuing to consolidate and become increasingly vertically integrated, with new services like Disney Plus, Apple Plus, HBO Max, and Peacock coming online. With this new landscape are complex issues to confront. And so it comes as no surprise that going through our process has been a lengthier undertaking than in previous years. Keep an eye on this, folks. A lot of things are happening here. We have to wait and see where things go. This is very important. Another story I wanted to bring up, this is within the movie TV realm, is a new study that came out. It's a study that was commissioned by Reframe and the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. This study refutes what is called the myth that movies with female or underrepresented lead or co-leading characters earn less money at the box office than films with white or male leads or co-leads. The report is titled The Ticket to Inclusion, which was just released, used models for controlling a set of production, distribution, and exhibition factors to ask the question, is it the gender and race ethnicity of the characters and or the support these films receive that contributes to differences in box office revenue? So let's go through what are the findings. Well, the results show a cycle in which films receive less funding. When such films receive less funding, the latter of which is a bigger factor in overall box office results. The data, which looked at the economic performance of 1,200 top films from 2007 to 2018, revealed that the instead of the strongest predictors of economic success for films is the number of theaters in which a movie was released, story strength, marketing spend, and production costs. Those are the varying factors they used to determine performance. Then they also looked at films with leads/co-leads from underrepresented groups earn more revenue when other influences were accounted for in the model. The study found a weaker but still significant predictor of success was the percentage of female characters in a film. Films starring women of color, for example, received the lowest funds in terms of median production costs and median marketing spend, domestic or international. The movies were also distributed in fewer median international territories than films with white, female, underrepresented male, or white male leads. So this study says it confirms their previous work, indicating that the gender of the co-lead character is not a significant predictor of box office performance. According to Professor Stacy L. Smith, head of the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative at USC's Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, she was one of the co-authors of this study. Rather, It is other factors that are within the control of executives: production costs, promotion, distribution density, and the story itself that play a key role in a movie's success. Let me tell you what that means. So everybody talks about we need to have movies and TV shows and content with diversity and inclusion and intersectionality. Checking the boxes, I call it, right? Checking all the boxes, making sure that your cast, your production team, everybody that's behind the scenes of the movie, in front of the camera, behind the camera, there has to be inclusivity, diversity. It has to be woke. But they said, and this is what's most important, it's the control of executives, production costs, promotion, distribution density, and the story itself play a key role in a movie's success. Therefore, corporate controls movies that make good money or not. Marketing, promotion, having the resources, that's what makes a movie a box office hit. So the people that you blame, it's the studios. And you know what? When they want to put when they want to bank on a movie they know they can make money, they make money. That's what they know how to do. So you just need to know that if there are certain movies that have a diversity or inclusive factor, you know, if it's good enough to be a script that's going to go ahead and make it to a big major movie studio, and they know they can sell it to a large range audience, then they will. And it will make money. Now, moreover, in the same story here, films with leading, co-leading characters from underrepresented racial ethnic backgrounds are a significant and notable predictor of the economic revenue domestically. The finding that cannot be ignored and is consistent with what activists, advocates, and artists have been saying for years. Stories with underrepresented leads and co-leads make money, period. Well, let's just put it like this. Good stories make money. And having leads or co-leads, you know, it's all about the performance. Like, I mean, you're just not going to put somebody out there that's a bad actor or bad actress and that thing's going to make money. No. The point is, even if that person might be labeled underrepresented or, underrepresented, as they say, or of a racial ethnic background, it doesn't make a difference. They're going to make money if the script is good, if the resources are there, and the studio greenlights it, and they put real money behind it. The movie's going to make money. That's it. Now, they said that they're going to expand a current 14-point roadmap for mitigating bias in the industry, quote, to include recommended changes to finance models based on the findings of the study, so that studios and production companies do not inadvertently underfund movies and shows based on mythological presumptions. Well, you know what? I would hope that doesn't happen at all. I would hope that we would see something happen where movies, again, I don't have a problem. I don't really have no qualms with what Reframe is doing right here. And also the Sundance Institute Women in Film, they want to go ahead and push about a bias industry. You know, that's fine. Go right ahead. As long as it's not a political agenda, I'm totally fine about that. But if we're getting good stories being told, that's what I want. And it doesn't change anything about anything. You know, do what you got to do. But give us good stories in the movie theater so I got my popcorn next to me and I'm watching great movies, okay? That's what I want. That's all that matters. TV shows, same thing. Give us something with a different story. And I think you take stories from different environments, people that are underrepresented, represent them. Show the stories. Let's see it. You know, I hope it's not going to be exploitative, but let's see the stories. I hope they decide to do that. That'd be very important. One other story I want to talk about before we get into my interview with Joshua Otten, is a story that came up shortly after the Grammy Awards, which I didn't really talk about much, but oh well. This is an interesting story because of music. And this is from James Shotwell of Haulix Daily, HAULIX Daily.com. Wrote a story saying, quote, who cares if the Grammy Awards do not appreciate rock and metal? Because we've talked about it. Those are genres that are dead. We're not seeing anything being talked about at all. So now in this story, James writes, rock and metal have been declared dead more times in the last decade than anyone can count. I would go so far as to say critics have proclaimed the death of rock more times than any other genre. And every other time they were proven wrong by a cavalcade of talented young artists. Rock is alive in virtually every city on the planet, and every night of the week, countless rock and metal artists are performing in bars, clubs, etc. The Grammy Awards cater to the largest audience possible, using the biggest names in music to lure viewers who otherwise would care less, or could care less, about what unseen panel of judges thinks of music. Except for a few performances, the vast majority of talent on the Grammy stage plays a regular rotation at every top 40 radio station. Rock and metal don't live in those stations anymore, at least not in a significant way. They don't cross over. So it makes sense we don't see the biggest bands in the genre performing on the award show stage. And let's be more honest, he says, going along. Not all rock and metal bands sound great when they appear on television. And here's the thing he says. You don't really care about who does or does not appear. That cannot possibly be true. You fell into rock and metal for all the reasons everybody else does, which includes a sense of rebellion that lives at its core. Rock and metal, especially current iterations of the genres, were never meant for mass consumption. These genres represent boundary-pushing artist expression that doesn't shy away from tough topics or tough emotions. It's outlaw music made for people sick of the system and oppression they feel while they're trying to live their lives. The bands rock and metal fans treat like gods of the same groups who openly loathe corporate events like the Grammy Awards. So again, who would care if the Grammys don't recognize? Now, he moves along and says, if you want rock and metal to be a more important topic of conversation in pop culture, then the fans and aging institutions that support these genres need to evolve. We need to celebrate young artists and appreciate the lessons who came before instead of doing the opposite. Separating classic from modern rock in a meaningful way so that newer artists have a better chance of reaching legendary status. Looking inward and destroying our preconceived notions of what makes a rock or metal band great so we might be open to the next genre-pushing talent that arises. We need to change, plain and simple. We need to stop expecting the biggest names in entertainment to make those changes for us. Very importantly said, because of the idea that with a new decade, we need to see a change in the cycle of music. I mean, for being 2020, I would think that we've had some couple of years we've had music kind of be a little bit lower tone, a little more dark, deep, and a little more moody. Obviously, a lot more moody. And I'd like to see some happiness, some light shine back up, and some more energy, some more oomph, some more gusto. I want that back. And I hope that comes up in the 2020s. Maybe we'll see something like that come up soon. At the moment, nobody's coming out with new albums that's going to really push the point. And nobody's getting pushed to the mainstream where that gets to be happening. But with streaming media, with Spotify and Pandora and Apple and Amazon Music and all, there's a chance to get there. So we just have to find out. And who knows where we're going to be, but I like the idea where he kind of brings us up. A very interesting point on this from Holix Dilly. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. Time for me to go to my featured interview for this week. Part 1 of my interview with Joshua Otten, CEO of Ronin Content Services, co-founder Content Original Productions at PRØHBTD. Here's part 1 of my interview here on the Broadcasters Podcast. My next guest spent the last 20 years as a trailblazing developer of premium entertainment, builder of digital media platforms. Get ready. This is going to be a long intro, folks. And creator of content marketing solutions. He assists my guests, entrepreneurs, in building successful brands, planning for exits and liquidity events, and navigating capital formation as a founder or board member in companies that have successfully raised more than $60 million in capital investments. Well, what are we going to be talking about him when it comes to, entertainment? But, it sounds like he's done a whole lot more than just that. But let's go ahead and get inside with this. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest, the CEO of Ronin Content Services, RONIN, like the movie with Robert De Niro and Jean Reno with the great car chase scene, Joshua Otten. Joshua, thanks for joining us here on the Broadcasters Podcast.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. So last August, you and the team made sure to let me know that you launched a content services and distribution agency called Ronin. You created this in partnership with rapper and cookies entrepreneur Burner, who is a rapper artist that is signed to Wiz Khalifa's label, record label. And you announced a new cannabis OTT network, or over-the-top network, and mobile content platform, Social Club TV. And with the accompanying announcement, you said the following, quote, by creating a new standalone dedicated company with a singular focus on serving the growing demand for branded cannabis and hemp-focused video, Ronin will continue leading original content with on-demand production services and a media distribution department. Now, Joshua, fill me in on the mission and why the cannabis and hemp industries definitely needed your help.
Not a problem. Yeah, thank you. So previously, I co-founded a company called PRØHBTD, where we built out a large media network, produced close to 100 hours of original programming, and then we had a pretty successful service agency that worked with cannabis and hemp brands. And after the company got absorbed and sort of morphed into a new company, I really wanted to continue to take what I had started and expand on it and continue. And so what we have at Ronin is we kind of have two structures of the company. We have a creative services agency, which does all the things that you expect most normal creative service agencies to do. We do branding, we do advertising, we do marketing, we do content. We also have a 3,000 square foot soundstage in Culver City, downtown Culver City, with state-of-the-art green screens and grids and all that stuff, so we can really produce high-quality content. And then on the media side, what's very unique about us is we have an entire media distribution platform. So we've been working with Viacom and Pluto TV to secure distribution for our original programming. We've started to acquire more content from artists such like Burner and are helping him produce more of it. And we're distributing it through Pluto TV's THC channel.
Let's go ahead. Before you go on that, I want to go ahead and go into that part. But first of all, how far back have you been working on content with PRØHBTD, which is spelled PRØHBTD? So take the I and the E out. Talk to me about how far back have you been doing content in the cannabis and hemp space?
Yeah, so we launched that company in, the sort of ideation of it was around 2014, and the official launch was 4/20 on 2015. And within, I think, 3 weeks, we produced our first video. We actually partnered with Green Lane, which at the time was Vape World, and we did some videos, some very nice lifestyle content for Firefly and PAX, one of actually the first PAX products in the market. And so that was it. It was about 2015, so 5 years ago, and we started to create original content. I started to create a lot of the IP there. So I met with Slink Johnson, for instance, who is the star of a show on Adult Swim called Black Jesus, and he's also he plays a character in a pretty successful video game called Grand Theft Auto. We worked with sort of emerging stars to create shows like cooking shows like Popeye.
Well, actually, I'm going to move along to that in a second. And forgive me. Let me go a little bit at a time, because I can let you go ahead and go the whole thing. So we're going to talk about Social Club TV in just a second. But what I want to ask about first is, from your work from PRØHBTD into now bringing up this full service over the top network and Social Club TV, my question is, I see through all the different OTT networks, there are various programs cannabis related. And obviously some of them, when you have to pitch some of these shows, they obviously have to be towards the stoner stereotype. And there is a particular stigma that we all know about within this business. And I'm just saying it as a fact for those that do not know, and I've made a mention on the program that one of my full-time projects that I work on in my full-time employment is cannabisradio.com, of which I'm program director. So I have, since 2015, I've followed the industry a lot, and I've also hosted a show on the network for the last couple of years called Blunt Business. So enough for my expertise just to give some context that I can talk back and forth here with Joshua. My question is that I have always, as a programmer for the cannabis and hemp industry, I want to also try to keep it where that the ongoing feeling of, where some people that you're talking to in pitch meetings, your mainstream conventional corporate suits that might be running these over-the-top networks, they're going to be expecting a certain kind of program. But, of course, you will feed that kind of programming that feeds the stigma that most of mainstream audience will probably expect. But my question to you, Joshua, is about the programming that you want to do to kind of change the narrative and show that it's not just more than just getting high. We want to show different sides of what the industry is and show people that everyday people on these shows and not make it glorified like some reality show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree. I mean, I think that the way that you destigmatize and normalize cannabis consumption is by just showing it as normal, right? You don't have to always focus on medical patients. You don't have to sort of over the top focus on advocacy. You just show it in normal day-to-day use. And so I think that what we do to sort of combat the idea of the stereotype is who we partner with and who we cast. So, we actually work with some people who don't consume that much cannabis or aren't daily users, who are hosts of shows. We work with people that are, daily users, but you wouldn't necessarily, they don't fit that trope of a stoner, like Brandon Lachey on Pop High, Bertie Harrelson on edibles. We've sort of, sought out talent that is authentic and has a connection to the cannabis and the cannabis community, but isn't necessarily sort of trading on sort of these roles that we've seen in mainstream media. And I think the other thing that I'm a big fan of is not everything, cannabis consumers who also want to watch content that's geared towards them don't need to watch content with cannabis in it. We're developing content around aliens. We're developing content around unsolved mysteries and things of criminal justice and looking at documentaries about highlighting some of the issues with the criminal justice system. So we're expanding. We're getting into health and wellness as well. We believe that this market has been underserved, and frankly, we have all the fun weed pun shows for sure, and we have that sort of obvious.
But there has to be a
content,
normalization where it's not like this is some taboo subject anymore. I mean, the truth is,
exactly.
We know that it's accepted as a political issue, it's bipartisan. As a cultural issue, the majority of Americans are in favor of it, and that would be the same around the world. So at this point, it's just like anything else. People just need to get there. There are certain people that are of a certain ilk that they're going to push back. But honestly, the truth is, it's a normal part of society. It should not matter anymore. I want to talk about the program because, Joshua, let me tell you something. You're very good. You just got this launch off of Social Club TV, and you are chomping at the bit to talk about it. And let me go ahead and give a little context to the audience here. So you have launched this. You have launched the network, correct?
We're actually launching in February 1st. So we're going to be launching. We're going to be live for Social Club TV in about 2 weeks.
So let's go ahead and give where everybody's going to be able to watch this. Distribution across Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Prime, Android TV, and iOS in more than 100 million homes. Congratulations. Fox Business reported this, quote, viewers can expect new and existing shows. You mentioned Pod Pop. You mentioned Marijuana Mania. You're going to have more than 200 hours of original cannabis-related programming, from cooking shows to comedy to true crime. Now, before I move along, is this some of the content that you've already produced under the Prohibited banner, and then you are creating new content on top of that? Is that what we're doing?
That's correct, yeah. So we have the library that we created along with the IP. So we're creating new shows and from the original sort of series, new episodes, and we're creating entirely new content with a lot of different partners.
And you already have, the network is currently being streamed on the THC channel and on the Viacom CBS-owned supported streaming service Pluto TV for free. Which, by the way, that is a coup to the fact you got on Pluto TV, because I don't think anybody talks enough about that service and how well it's run and how great a content. Because, I mean, for you to have that kind of cable service, to be along the lines of MTV and Bloomberg and CNN and all those channels, to be in the same league, in the same realm with quality content is great. So you're going to have the subscription service. It'll launch, like you said, February 1st. And viewers will be able to access exclusive content. But my question first is, you wanted to go ahead and launch this as an over-the-top network. Did you ever consider taking this to cable channels? Would they ever put on a program, a network like this?
I think they eventually will. It was interesting, 2.5 years ago, we started conversations with places besides Pluto. Pluto was at the time independently owned. And the first thing was, our media sales, their cable network monetizes through ads, right? So they're saying, look, we're never going to run cannabis ads, and we're afraid that our normal brands won't allow advertising in front of your content. So we just don't want anything to do with it. And what's happened now is that not only are these quote unquote sort of non-cannabis or normal brands not afraid, but they're clawing at it. If you look at brands, some of the stereotypes of the brands like Oreo cookies or Grubhub, these are brands that want these consumers because they believe that they're a good fit demographically for what they're trying to sell or the services that they're trying to promote. So we went from basically not being able to get, mainstream distribution to being able to point to our relationship with Pluto and say, hey, these audiences are watching for an average of 35 minutes per session, which is stunning. I mean, the average view time on a Facebook video is 10 seconds. So we have audiences, we did over 75 million minutes watched last year just on Pluto alone. So we can go to other cable networks and point to the success and say, look, these are the stats. You can look them up. You can confirm them. An average view time of over 35 minutes means they're watching over a half-hour content block. They're also watching the ads, and they're tuning in. And so the content works in that format because Pluto is a linear cable network style format. So we're hopeful that as we start to see other mainstream brands outside of cannabis and hemp adopt this, what we believe is that will also further normalize the content. It'll further help get ad revenue in from non-cannabis and THC brands, which will help us expand the network. And, it's kind of a bit of a self-fulfilling destiny.
So you have, now, as your work prior to Social Club TV, your company, PRØHBTD, has been servicing as one of the digital disruptors in streaming media. You've been servicing a lot of great projects out there for a lot of different platforms that will go ahead and host your content. And you've been able to develop, produce, and creatively direct 18 different shrines and shows across a variety of formats under the title Chief Content Officer on more than 18 networks and platforms. And you have partnerships with Post Media, Daily Motion, and Pluto TV. And the content has also been distributed on proprietary channels of Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Prime. So you had to create these relationships. And to be able to go and know that you were going to be able to offer a particular kind of content. And obviously there's other providers of cannabis and hemp-related content out there looking to get to those same audiences and to also reach those same, those platforms to go ahead and get that content out and get it distributed. Talk to me about how you're able to go and foster these relationships, because obviously that stigma's there, but you had a lot of people open their ears and their eyes to the ideas.
Yeah, I agree. So, early on, we one of my co-founders had a relationship with the CEO of Pluto, and again, their business model was they wanted to service a large variety of niche, quote unquote niche content consumers that wanted to watch, content under different categories, and so they recognized that cannabis under this THC label would be one of them, and so we were really one of the few I would call broadcast quality content providers that could produce both the amount and volume of content that is needed for that sort of relationship. You just can't produce, an hour a month and have that sort of distribution, but it also has to be quality. It can't just be, a cell phone at your couch smoking a bong. So I think it's a unique thing in the sense that it wasn't just the ideas or the shows or the IP. It had to do with the execution as well. Having a great team. I mean, we were really lucky. We had an amazing team that, at one point we scaled up to do about 35 episodes or, unique episodes of content a month at around 11 minutes, and all of it multi-camera, 4K broadcast quality. So we really were able to scale it up. And, we didn't find a lot of resistance necessarily on things like Apple TV or Roku, but it was still tough to get other people to pay attention to it. And it was tough to obviously monetize, both because cannabis brands are very early stage. Hemp wasn't really a thing 3 years ago in terms of CBD brands, and the mainstream brands were staying away.
Now, I want to ask you, obviously your content is drawing an audience, but what I'm going to ask you about is take me inside when you are trying to create content. If there are certain components you're trying to create within certain projects that will draw more people to be interested in what you're doing. I mean, what is it that you do to try to get the fringe element, the mainstream audience to attach themselves or to engage in new content that PRØHBTD or through Social Club TV creates?
That's great. So, if I can understand, you're saying how can we engage these audiences and get them to actually want to sit down? And
Outside of the core audience, how are you drawing other listeners, drawing other demographics? Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think part of that is expanding on the content we create. So I think again, our initiative is to go beyond what I think what people would anticipate as what a cannabis consumer would watch, and so we're going to have content that would expand on it. Health and wellness is going to be a huge category for us this year. And I think health and wellness, you have a nice crossover between cannabis consumers, hemp consumers, and people that are paying attention to their health. And so health and wellness content is going to be big for us. I think that's going to be a pretty big draw, as well as comedy. Comedy cuts across all cultures, all genres. It's fun. We're working on a couple of pretty awesome relationships with some bigger brands and other publishers who see a crossover of what we're doing. We're also looking at acquiring libraries of content that I think wouldn't be, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think of for a cannabis platform. So again, looking at stuff like mysteries and conspiracy theories and all kinds of other fun shows that I believe would attract a slightly wider audience.
Excellent. Now, this directs me right where I want to go into, because I really, not only did I want to go ahead and get an idea of what you're doing within the space, obviously you are looking to bring some product and some content out there so that the digital streamers, they're going to be reaching out obviously to you. So, I mean, besides the relationships you already have, I have no doubt, and I wouldn't know if you would tell me or not, but some of the larger streamers that I'm going to mention coming up, the ones that are spending billions of dollars right now, that have been spending for a long time, the Netflixes of the world. Well, let me ask you first off, have companies, we already had Amazon Prime with a relationship, have you had any conversations at all? Any talking between Hulu or Netflix or, say Disney Plus, anything like that? Are there any other streamers that you've just had any contact with?
Yeah, so look, I have relationships with all of the major OTT and streaming platforms. My background, I spent the first 7 years from 2000 to 2007 in premium content. So I have relationships there. We've done a couple of meet and greets and road shows to pitch them content. Admittedly, this was over 3 years ago, and I think there was that sort of concern. But look, Netflix, after we created our show Pop High and released it, Netflix did a series that was kind of very similar. I don't remember the name of it, but they basically did a cooking show about people cooking with edibles, and it was a contest, it was just sort of a cooking with weed show. So they're not opposed to it, and they're starting to lean in more. And I think especially with some of the networks that are subscription-based, they're a little bit more, they're not as adverse and afraid to sort of, upset their ad people, and so they're willing to take a couple more risks. Right.
If I'm correct, I believe that's the show Cooking on High.
Yes, Cooking on High. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the one. All right. So here's the thing now. I'm going to ask you a few things because you are well equipped to answer what's going on in the digital disruption of streaming media and the over-the-tops. Because now you are your own over-the-top service. You are programming a full programming of programming here, and you're offering a subscription service. Real time on demand. You are in the game. So let's talk about the bigger game that's out there, the big piece of the pie that you're looking to get in. You're looking to get more of, right? How big a piece can you get? Netflix, according to Variety, is projected to spend more than $17 billion on content in 2020. Joshua, I mean, before I get in the question, I don't even understand. It's a miraculous amount of money they're spending. When the fact of the matter is they're buying junk bonds. They have spent already $13 billion last year on it was $10 billion on content, I think, last year. But the thing is, they continue to run at a loss. They're $13 billion in the hole. And just because they have a positive cash flow is the only thing that's keeping them survive. So I don't like the model. They're taking a lot of risk because they know the competition is hot on their heels. They feel it breathing on their neck, and I understand why. Look at this, everybody now, and you've read this, I'm sure. So let's just go through and talk about what's going on with the spending of content by all these services. So Netflix is going to spend $17.3 billion this year in content on a cash basis. It's according to a forecast by Wall Street firm BMO Capital Markets, up from $15.3 billion in 2019. Okay, well, so much more. And their content spending will top $26 billion by 2028 compared to the others. For 2020, Disney Plus has said They will spend $1 billion in original programming, $1 billion for operating expenses. AT&T, Warner Media, is going to put $2 billion in for HBO Max in 2020. Peacock, the new Comcast NBC Universal service, $2 billion in the service's first 2 years. Now, that's good news for you. There's a lot of money to be had right there. But you can understand, I mean, you're having to run this, I don't know how much money you have in the coffers to go ahead and spend on content to put for your own service, let alone provide content to the other services. But what do you think of the fact that Netflix might be sending themselves into debt for content if that's the right route for them to keep their spot? And would that be a move that you would do if you were in that situation?
Well, that's great. I mean, I think so first of all, I agree. I think that it's an obscene amount of money. I have a friend, anecdotal, that will help take shed some light on this. He's working on he's a writer on a new Amazon series, and they're spending $500 million for 10 episodes.
Wow.
That is $50 million an episode.
So who's the star? Is this a star vehicle that's where the star's getting about half of that?
Yeah, I can't.
No, right. You can't say, but that's exactly what it is.
It's actually it's like basically Mission Impossible. Imagine if they made Mission Impossible, right? Which is a 2-hour movie that costs, I don't know, a couple $100 million.
Yes.
So imagine that scale, but over 10 hours, because each episode's an hour. So they're basically taking Mission Impossible and they're making it a 10-hour TV show. And so, but the budget, they're doing that style of stuff. So yeah, sure, the writers are getting paid, but and that content takes 2 years to write, produce, and get out. And so, imagine you watch it, you like it, now you're gonna have to wait another 1.5 or 2 years to even see the next season. So the scale of it's insane, and I think it actually helps us because I'll tell you why. They're spending more and more money. They're producing more and more original content. I don't think it's sustainable. I think you don't think it's sustainable. But at the same time, there's still audiences that aren't getting all the content they want. And what's interesting is with all of these walled gardens, Disney plus Hulu plus ESPN being one, Peacock being another, Viacom Pluto being another, the subscriber base can't afford and will not want to subscribe to 10 different things. They're going to pick one or two. And if you pick a Netflix, say, and a Hulu, believe it or not, you kind of run out of content after a while. It's great. It looks good. It's high quality. They're spending millions. And so they're looking for content that they can consume. And that's where I think a Pluto comes in. That's where Social Club TV comes in. That's where we can come in and say, hey, here's 1,000 hours of content. It's free. You don't have to pay anything extra. You're going to be able to sit there and watch it. It's ad supported. We'll have an SDOD service if you don't want to watch for ads for you as well. And we have a niche. And then what I believe is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years is as the sort of the content wars cool down and everyone realizes that it's not sustainable, they're going to come and say, wait a second, you have 1,000 hours of content that you've produced and curated and aggregated. We'd like to have a turnkey cannabis channel. Here it is. And I'll be your partner.
Wow. I'm
going to be your partner in giving you 1,000+ hours, and you can now have, and we'll just revenue share. I'm not going to, we can revenue share if it's SVOD, we can revenue share if it's AVOD, ad supported or subscription supported. And that's kind of our premise. And that's why philosophically, even 5 years, 6 years ago when this started, when sort of, Netflix was obviously around, but the landscape wasn't what it was, I still made a conscious decision to not make a living off of Facebook videos or Instagram or influencers. I believed in the value of premium content, broadcast quality, and it's tough and it's not cheap necessarily, but if you do it intelligently and you make the right partners, you can scale it.
Now, here's the other thing. And this is amazing that all this money is being spent at this time, because the biggest thing I also noticed too is the fact of the matter is that, you've been there. You're chief content officer at PRØHBTD. You have worked and you have hired and you have employed producers, directors, writers, screenrunners, showrunners, everything. You have that there. You understand the plight of the real people behind the scenes, behind the talent that's really making these projects sing. Here's the other problem, is that we know the labor unions are right now in a big mess, because I've been talking about this since December of 2018, when I knew the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, and the Association of Talent Agents, the packaging deals that they were doing beforehand, that they wanted to go ahead and get the old guard out. They wanted to make major changes. We get to April 2019. They decide, okay, we're at a stalemate. If you don't sign this code of conduct, you change your ways, talent agents, screw you. We're burning the deal. We're going to just let our writers walk right out. And they did it. And now we have lawsuits, multiple going on. So now, more than a decade after writers shut down Hollywood, which was about 100 days, studios and networks are now preparing for another potential walkout that could disrupt Hollywood. So now, Hollywood's entering this, and this is because of the digital revolution. Not just the old guard, let's change the whole ways. You now have, and then there's a story that goes in from Friday also talked about this as well. But here's the thing. Now, the stake is at the studios, which are at the throes of launching new direct-to-consumer services. So now, Peacock, HBO Max, they're coming out, what is it, May 1st, July 15th, and May 1st is when the Writers Guild of America ends their deal with the AMPTP, Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, I believe it is. So AMPTP, the SAG-AFTRA is right after that, and nobody is ready to negotiate. Netflix will try to do their own solo deal. How do you see all these simultaneous labor strikes, which I'm so surprised. I think Deadline writes about it. Nobody else reports about this. I have to go digging for news about this every week. What do you think about what this is going to do to the writers, agents, producers, affecting OTT services like you, content providers like you? How is this going to affect you, and how are you seeing this playing out?
Well, so how it affects us is, number one, I've always supported paying, living wages to anyone in our company. So that means they're a PA, or they're a day player, or they're a full-time social media person. This idea that you can live and work in Los Angeles and pay people $12 or $13 an hour, or even $15 an hour, and expect them to work 12-hour days, I think personally it's just not right. So we do that. I'm not a guild signatory. I'm just too small for it. I couldn't, I one guild operator on any of my positions would, eat most of our budgets. We operate at a $300 to $400 cost per minute basis.
Wow.
And so, but if you look at the quality, I think it stands up to, some of the Vice type content, which is maybe closer to $2,000 to $3,000, even $4,000 per minute. So for us, honestly, I don't think we're going to have an impact in sort of the content we're producing or acquiring. What this means long term, I think it's unfortunate. I think there's a lot of greed. I was always shocked at the whole idea of packaging. Personally, I mean, look, my first job in the industry, period, really my first job out of college was I was on a TV lit desk in UTA in 2000. So I was there back over 20 years ago, or about 20 years ago, when you had an NBC studio selling content or producing content for Fox Network. You didn't have even the full vertical integration back then. And I just think I was shocked, because I was like, there's no way, the agents are going to have to figure out how to give something, because they're doing a packaging deal when in some cases all they're doing is they're like, oh, here's a director and maybe one actor, and we want to package the show. And it's like, well, you're already, you're basically, what you're doing is you're eating off the bottom line. You're taking money from not just the writers, but from everyone, because all of these production budgets are zero sum. They are what they are, right? If you have a $100 million budget, it's a $100 million budget. And if all of a sudden your agency comes in and says, well, we're going to take 10 million out of it, it's not just the writers who suffer. You're taking money that can be used for craft services, for makeup, for hair. And the old model was they just commissioned the people that they got the jobs for. So the way that happened was unfortunate. I think the studios didn't want to get involved for a variety of reasons, the majority of which was their budgets are zero sum. So it's not up to them to fight who gets a piece of what. So they were fine, letting the sort of those two fight over each other. So where I sit and I look at the landscape, is what we're really seeing is we're seeing writers and producers and actors who don't have long-term contracts, who are constantly working job for job. They're smaller episode orders. So even though they're bigger, it's a $50 million show. Everyone, it's a $50 million budget. Does not mean that the writer makes, a percentage of that $50 million. And in fact, they'll be booked for longer because it takes longer to write, and maybe some of them will stay on through production. But 10 episodes ends up being 10 episodes, and whether it's a 1 year or 2 year job, you're immediately looking for another gig. And that's the way the industry has always been. That's not kind of the issue. I think the issue at hand is that the people who aren't creating the content at the end of the day, whether they're helping pay for it or they're helping secure the jobs, are taking a bigger cut. And I can even tell one more anecdote if you have time. Look at Discovery Communications. The deal with Discovery Communications used to be this: you pitch a show, right? Reality show, docuseries. they would buy the show from you. They would own the IP, and they would pay you to produce it, and you would produce it for them, and then you would get hired on, and you would stay on, et cetera. Now, they changed the model where you pitch the show, they buy the show, they don't pay you until you deliver the content. So how are you going to finance the show? You have to deficit finance the production for IP you don't own, that there's no such thing as backend anymore, because Discovery Communications is not going to syndicate it anymore outside of their own network. Maybe they will way down the line to a Netflix possibly, but when Netflix buys it, there's no backend necessarily. That Netflix, and except for these sort of limited movie releases, Netflix shows live on Netflix. Whereas back in the day, you would work on a show, NBC Studios, you would do this, you would do that, then it would sell in the syndication, and you would see royalties. So, even in that world, you have producers who are having to deficit finance reality shows, not getting paid until they deliver them. And if your margins are 30% or 20%, and you have to finance your own content that you don't own, and that costs you 5 or 10% of the loan, it cuts your profits in half. So it's a pretty grueling industry in general right now.
And I want to bring up some more about that, as a matter of fact. But I'll tell you one thing. You mentioned about Netflix and the fact of how they're putting out limited releases of movies, and really it's for your consideration. They wanted to get the Oscar nominations, and what was it? I forget what was the Deadline of Variety talking about the fact that because of the $13 billion that Netflix did, they got all these nominations. Well, is that really worth it? I mean, okay, so you're showing that you spent less money to create movies than the studios did, and the Oscar and the Academy, the Academy decided to go ahead and nod to the Netflix crowd to credit their movies or TV shows, and the same thing goes for the Golden Globes for movies and TVs, and the SAGs. It's like just for notoriety isn't really so much when it comes to your bottom line, because subscriptions are not holding us solid. But let me go ahead and go ahead and make a point. I'll go ahead and get to my next question.
Yeah. So, I would say, look, they're not doing that for subscribers, and they're not doing that for notoriety. They're doing that to attract talent at the end of the day. If you want to get marquee A-list talent, how are you going to do that? And we're talking before Netflix started spending the money. Besides the money, you're talking about, top level actors and actresses and writers who may not need, quote unquote, the money. They have the luxury of choosing their own projects. So a lot of these, for a variety of reasons, actors, actresses, directors, writers, they for them to get an Oscar nomination or win an Oscar is a big deal for them, obviously. So for when I look at them spending the money, it's not a subscription acquisition, retention thing. And I don't think it's for even the news as much as it is to point to talent agents to say, hey, you're going to bring your A-list stars for us, because not only will we pay them, we'll get them recognition.
Part 2 with Joshua Otten next week here on the show. And we'll come back then with more news and more information and all. And again, if everybody wants to go and be a part of what we're doing here, and you'd like to go ahead and contribute, want to be a guest on the program, by all means, please email me, kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com, kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com. Maybe next week we'll hear back from Bob Pittman, who writes back to Sherrod Brown's request for information about the layoffs at iHeartMedia. That'd be interesting. I'll keep an eye on that. Till next week, remember, content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast, presented by broadcasterspodcast.com and kingofpodcasts.com. The Broadcasters Podcast is brought to you by kingofpodcasts.com/Amazon. If Amazon is good enough for the King of Podcasts, it most certainly is good for you. kingofpodcasts.com/Amazon. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, The Wrestling is Real Podcast, exclusively at kingofpodcasts.com.